You may be seated. The children are dismissed to Children's Church.
Our scripture this morning is Psalm 91. We'll read this all together. He who dwells in the shelter of the Most High will abide in the shadow of the Almighty. I will say to the Lord, my refuge and my fortress, my God, in whom I trust. For he will deliver you from the snare of the fowler and from the deadly pestilence. He will cover you with his pinions, and under his wings you will find refuge. His faithfulness is a shield and buckler.
Turn nose. Sorry. Oh. You're supposed to be standing over here.
I didn't know that.
There you go.
Sorry, guys. Intermission. You will not fear the terror of the night, nor the arrow that flies by day, nor the pestilence that stalks in darkness, nor the destruction that wastes at noonday. 1,000 may fall at your side, 10,000 at your right hand, but it will not come near to you. You will only look with your eyes and see the recompense of the wicked. Because you have made the Lord your dwelling place, the Most High, who is my refuge. No evil shall be allowed to befall you, no plague come near to your tent. For he will command his angels concerning you, to guard you in all your ways. On their hands they will bear you up, lest you strike your foot against a stone. You will tread on the lion and the adder, the young lion and the serpent you will trample underfoot. Because he holds fast to me in love, I will deliver him. I will protect him, because he knows my name. When he calls to me, I will answer him. I will be with him in trouble. I will rescue him and honor him. With long life, I will satisfy him and show him my salvation.
I know already I'm going to need this water. This is a great psalm. In fact, it's the favorite psalm of many, many people. It promises a lot. And me being the skeptical person that I am, when I read it, I go, it seems to promise too much, in fact. Because I'm sitting here thinking, really? Really, God, this is what you're going to do for me? Because I don't always feel that way. It'd be great if this psalm was true, and it would be great if it applied to me. But boy, when I look at my life and what I've gone through, I'm not always sure I see this psalm becoming a reality. There's a line there at the beginning of the psalm. It says here, will abide in the shadow of the Almighty. He who abides in the shadow of the Almighty. There's a book, it's called In the Shadow of the Almighty. Has anybody ever read it or heard of it? Anybody want to tell me who wrote it? Elizabeth Elliot wrote that book about her husband, Jim Elliot. Now, I want you to think about that after hearing this psalm and what God promises. No harm will ever come to you. No evil will ever befall you. As long as you are abiding in the shadow of the Almighty. Well, at least Elizabeth Elliot believed her husband Jim and his 3 friends, including Nate Saint, were abiding in the shadow of the Almighty, or she wouldn't have named the book that. No harm will ever come to you. All 4 of them were killed in South America as they brought the gospel to a tribe of natives there that had little to no contact with outsiders. Probably, when was that? Probably late 50s, early 60s, maybe, something like that. But when you read the story in the shadow of the Almighty, the whole story is about the willingness of 4 people to have harm come upon them, for evil to seemingly win the day. So how do we reconcile this promise? There's so many promises here. By the way, I don't know if you caught them all, but if you abide in the shadow of the Almighty, you don't have to worry about sickness. You don't have to worry about pestilence or plagues or disease. Wow, wouldn't that be nice? How about that thing that we have in our world that does more wasting destruction than anything? You don't have to worry about cancer. Because it says right there, if you abide in the shadow of the Almighty, if you rest, you live in dwell in His presence, He's going to protect you from these things. My goodness, you don't even have to worry about falling off a ladder. Where's Mike? Mike's in here somewhere. You don't have to worry about falling off a ladder because God will send His angel to catch you and not let your foot hit the ground. I mean, they're great promises. I just wish they were true. Are they true? It's really an intriguing psalm. We probably should start here with these words. With promises of safety, victory, and honor pouring out of it in verse after verse, it is no surprise that it has become a great favorite of many down the centuries. And yet, we must be careful. It is perhaps here more than anywhere that we must resist the temptation simply to appropriate all the nice bits of Scripture for ourselves, simply because we would like them to be true for us. The really big question, the question upon which every blessing hangs, is this: to whom are these promises given? We need to ask and answer this question honestly before we can decide how we should sing and respond to this psalm. Was this psalm written for us? Were these promises given to all of God's people? Are there conditions to this psalm? I'm preaching on this psalm because, last week I'm like, I don't know what psalm I'm going to preach on. And Kathy said, you should preach on Psalm 91. This is the psalm that her brother read to her mom, and Kathy was there in the room right when she was passing away. And it brought them such great comfort. Is this a psalm that was written for that situation? Is this the psalm that is written for the person who is lying in the hospital, wasting away from some disease? Is this the psalm for the person who has enemies who plot against them, who speak slanderous words, that God is going to protect them from any of that evil? Is it a psalm for them? Well, the first thing we need to see is this psalm has quite a few conditions. In fact, I'm starting to realize, I grew up being taught this, that in the Old Covenant, there's a lot of conditions, which is why we never got those promises, because we never could keep those conditions. And then the New Covenant comes along in the New Testament, and we get unconditional promises. It might have taken me 60 years or more, but I'm starting to realize that actually is not true. The New Covenant the promises in the New Testament, they're just as conditional, guys. There's only one difference between the Old Testament and the New Testament when it gives promises. The conditions have to be met, but in the New Testament, somebody else can meet those conditions for you. That doesn't make them unconditional promises. God will not grant those promises unless the conditions have been met. But someone can meet them for us. And it feels to us like they're unconditional, but we should never think that. They're not unconditional. Somebody met them for me. We celebrated that person meeting those conditions for us, which is why we can receive the promises God has for us. So we come to chapter 91 here, Psalm 91, and we begin with the conditions. He who dwells in the shelter of the Most High. Well, all the promises of this chapter could belong to you. Do you dwell in the shelter of the Most High? I want to. I would like to. I feel like I'm at least there from time to time. But you know, the word dwell means stay there. Never leave it. In fact, I remember preaching a long time ago, even in this church, we were going through the book of Genesis, and one of my complaints with Jacob is going up to Bethel. Bethel means the house of God. And he's going up to Bethel to worship God, and God tells him to go there because Jacob has forgotten a promise that he made. That when I come back to the land, I will renew my promise, I'll renew this covenant, and I will worship you. So God comes to him right after a disastrous situation in Shechem, where Jacob and his family show just how far they have gone from God, how far they have removed themselves from dwelling in his presence. God comes to him and says, now listen, Jacob, bury your idols under this tree. Get them all, and then I want you to go and take a bath, a good long one, and scrub hard. I want you to put on new clothes, and I want you to take you and your family and all of your things, and I want you to climb to the top of this mountain, and I want you to worship me there. There's one other thing in there. I want you to dwell there. Same Hebrew word. I want you to dwell on top of Bethel, worshiping me. Jacob did all those things. His whole family went up on Bethel, and he offered up a sacrifice, and they worshiped the Lord. But you know what they didn't do? They didn't dwell there. Because after a few weeks, I don't know, a few days, maybe they were up there for months. We're not told how long, but we know this, they came down. And before they even got to the bottom of Bethel, Rachel begins to give birth to Benjamin. And she dies giving birth. One wonders with this psalm, if they would have been obedient and they dwelt on Bethel, would Rachel have been protected? I don't know, because in some ways I'm not sure that's what the psalm is really going to get at, because when we get to even how it applies to Jesus, that's not always the case. But it wouldn't shock me if Jacob had been obedient and he dwelled on Bethel in the presence of God, that Rachel may have survived that birth. But they didn't listen to God, though they dwelt for a while. So when I ask you again, do you dwell in the presence of God? Do you dwell in the shelter, his protection? You may say, yes, I do. And like me, if we were honest, we could say, we're there from time to time. But how often am I finding myself leaving that shelter? Going out on my own. Oh, I can take care of this, Lord. Thanks for helping me with this problem, but I think I can handle this week's issues. I can manage them. Things fall apart and I'm not protected and I'm wondering why, and maybe because I didn't meet the condition. He who dwells in the shelter of the Most High will abide in the shadow of the Almighty. We study John 15 all the time. Great chapter about abiding. Wow, how hard is it, guys, to abide? You know, it's one thing to trust Jesus in a moment. It's one thing to be obedient in an event. But to abide, live in that obedience, constantly being in the shelter of his protection. The psalmist then goes on to say, I will say to the Lord, my refuge and my fortress, my God in whom I trust. He wants to proclaim that he certainly wants this. You and I may like the idea of fleeing to God alone for safety. But in reality, we seek safety through caring for our health, through exercise, through education, through qualifications, through money, insurance, investments, or pensions, through close human relationships, and in many other ways. We don't mind adding in a God bit to the security mix. We do not seek security in God alone. There is therefore, right at the start, a problem with appropriating to ourselves the promise of this psalm. This simply is not a description of you and me. You know, we can hardly help it. We need to trust in God. You know, it wasn't that long ago, I don't see Amelia here, but it wasn't that long ago that Mimi and I were talking how fortunate it is to be in a family that when things go wrong, we have a safety net. We were talking about that in the context we were talking about a person who doesn't have a safety net. And how hard it is that when anything goes wrong, they are on their own. Now, the truth is, if they're a follower of Christ, they're not on their own because they have a safety net. His name is Yahweh. But let's not kid ourselves, guys. Am I always trusting in God, my safety net? Or do I sometimes trust in the people I'm in a close relationship with because I know they'll be my safety net too? He has it right. It is very difficult to trust in God alone for things. You know, I've got a health thing coming up this week. I started running a month and a half ago because of it. So when I read exercise, yeah, I trust in God for my health, but you know what? I'm going to go out and exercise because all of my trust isn't going to rest there. It should. That doesn't mean I shouldn't exercise, but I shouldn't be trusting in it. You see, I don't think there's things wrong with these things, but you can't trust in these things. And by the way, this particular health thing, I don't think the running's going to do me any good. In the end, all the exercise in the world is not going to matter one way or another. It's going to all come down to whether or not God has something for me or not. So who's the psalm written to? Did God just write us a psalm that none of us actually can meet its stipulations? By the way, those aren't the only stipulations in the psalm. You can find other ones if you want to. Verse 14 is a stipulation for this psalm. Because he holds fast to me in love, I will deliver him. Are you holding fast to God in love? Do you know, we sing this song, He Will Hold You Fast? And I made the reference to the fact that actually in the Bible, He Will Hold You Fast is primarily used in the relationship of a husband to his wife. A husband is called to hold his wife fast. Now it doesn't actually ever speak of God holding us fast with this particular word, but we do have that God, nothing can tear us from God's arms. So that's kind of holding us fast. This is actually the only place in the Bible that speaks of us holding God fast. We are to hold God fast in love. In fact, it's the condition. If you hold me fast, we have the same word actually, by the way, that it's used of women to their husbands, the wife to the husbands. It is often translated, maybe you have this in your version, cleave. It's the word for cleave. You've heard that. Leave your father and mother and cleave to your husband. Hold fast to him. So it does say of the wife, she should hold fast to the husband as well. Are we cleaving to God? Are we holding, with that song I think of, I Am? I had to change the words in that song because that word proclaims that we are holding fast to God. And I'm like, really? I fail so often at that, I had to change the words of that song to have God hold fast to me. But that's one of the conditions in this psalm. And as you go through, you will see others. So does the psalm apply to us? Can I say to my friend Kathy that this psalm does bring comfort to the person dying and to the family surrounding them? I believe it does. But I think you have to understand how it gets there. This psalm is a royal psalm. It wasn't written for us. It was written for the son of David. It was written for the king. And you can tell this in a couple of places. Not very many of us will ever have 1,000 may fall at your side and 10,000 at your right hand, but it will not come near you. You will only look with your eyes and see the recompense of the wicked. There's not a whole lot of people that are going to have that experience, but you know who does have that experience? The King of Israel. Because the King of Israel leads God's people into battle. And this is a promise to that king. This was a promise to David. And it was a promise to all of David's descendants. Most of them, like us, and even David himself, did not meet the conditions. But David had one descendant that did meet the conditions. And it's especially a promise to him because he's the one that gets to realize them. But he leads his people, God's people, in battle. And the promise is, thousands may fall at your side, 10,000s at your right hand, but nothing will come near to you. You know why I'm glad about that promise? Because there is a day coming in the future that we call Armageddon. And Jesus is going to lead all of his people, those who have died long ago and those who have been transformed in the twinkling of an eye in the last trumpet. They will be called up into the clouds, and he will bring them in an army down into a massive battle. And you know what this psalm tells me? None of us are going to die in it. None of us are going to be touched by harm. And by the way, he's fighting against Satan. Satan's the general of the other side. He's got lots of power. We might be nervous about that. We don't need to be. Because he says right here to Jesus, thousands may fall at your side, 10,000 at your right hand, but it won't come near to you, nor to your people. Who is it going to come near? You will look with your eyes and see the reward, the recompense, the just deserves of the wicked. The only people dying in this battle are wicked, not the people that you have made righteous. That's a great promise. So we'll receive that promise. This whole psalm is written for Jesus. Let's read it now with Jesus in mind, and then we will see how it does. And then we'll ask the question, does it have anything to do with us? He who dwells in the shelter of the Most High. Was there any second of Jesus' life that he was not dwelling in the shelter of the Most High? Guys, when he was a baby, he was dwelling in the shelter of the Most High. When he was laying in that manger, he was protected by the hand of God. There were angels, just as this psalm says. There were angels all around ministering to him, serving him, protecting him. You know why I know they were protecting him? I'll go back to the book of Revelation. There's actually a story in the book of Revelation about Jesus' birth. There was something else out there that night. Not just shepherds, not just sheep, not just angels. You know what else was out there that night? A big red dragon. That's what Revelation 12 tells us. And that red dragon was representative of Satan. He was hunting that baby. He wanted to destroy that baby. God said, oh, no, I'm sorry. He's dwelling in the shelter of the Most High. He's abiding in my shadow, the shadow of the Almighty. You're not touching him. You can't get anywhere near him. And when the red dragon couldn't get him, he sent some emissaries, a guy named Herod the Great. And he sent his soldiers to kill him. No, sorry. You can't touch him. This psalm fits perfectly Jesus' life to a point. For he will deliver you from the snare of the fowler. This is imagery in the Old Testament. It's used numerous times. He really isn't thinking that we are birds and we get caught in traps. It is a metaphor that people plot against us. David knew something about this. People were always plotting against him. We know from Psalm chapter 2 that the nations rage and plot against the Son of God. And when Jesus was alive, people were plotting against him. Guys, we got passage. We're going to be going through a gospel next, probably the Gospel of Mark. I should just point these things out as we go. I could take this psalm and use it as my outline, and every time we come to it, I can show it to you. Oh, look at here, the Pharisees and the Sadducees who hate each other, all of a sudden are friends. And what are they doing? They're plotting. They're setting a trap for Jesus. And they did it numerous times. Did that trap work? Actually, it never did work, not even the last time. Jesus didn't get caught in a trap. Jesus made a choice. So God did protect him from the schemes of these guys. That doesn't mean God protected him from dying. But he did not die at the hands of the Romans or the hands of Caiaphas and the Sadducees and the Sanhedrin because of their schemes. Acts chapter 2 tells us he died because it was the preordained, destined plan of God. And that's why he died. Not because they schemed, because God promised him, I'm not going to let their schemes work out. And from deadly pestilence, this is the word. This is a Hebrew word, DBR, Dabir. They don't have vowels. Until much later, the vowels are added into Hebrew. Causes a problem sometimes. We don't always know which word it is. We translate it deadly pestilence here. But he's going to say pestilence in verse 6. So that seems a little repetitive. The other word that it could be is word. That is the Hebrew word for word, Dabor. What's a deadly word? And actually, I think it fits better here. Because the parallels, he will deliver you from people who are plotting against you or people who are slandering you, placing curses upon you, using their words to harm you. Now, this makes sense because the people who plot often are the people who use their words to harm you as well. He says, nope, I'm not going to let any of that happen to my son. He will cover you with the pinions, with his pinions, which are wings, and under his wings you will find refuge. Now, a lot of people think that he's drawing another metaphor, the image of a bird. A bird comes and covers her chicks or children, and Jesus uses it himself in the New Testament. The hen puts her wings over the chicks to protect them. A bird is actually not mentioned here, and there is something else that also can have wings. A cherubim and a seraphim. And there are two cherubim that sit on top of the Ark of the Covenant. And their wings, and it uses the word cover, covers over the mercy seat where Jesus' blood is going to be sprinkled. So many Old Testament scholars actually think what is being referred to here is a promise that God will send his cherubim, and the cherubim's wings will be metaphorically spread over you, covering you, protecting you from any judgment that could come from God, any harm that could come. And then he turns to another metaphor. His faithfulness is a shield and buckler. So he has a buckler, is like armor. A shield and armor. So he has this also protecting him, all of this image. And then we get a series of things of what he's being protected from. And wow, it covers the whole list. You will not fear the terror of the night. This reminds us of the plague of darkness in Egypt. When the Egyptians, they feared the terror of the night. But Israel did not, because the darkness did not fall upon the land of Goshen. nor the arrow that flies by day. You know, when you live in that culture, and you're, especially if you're a warrior, we probably could apply this to something in our own time. The arrow that flies, I think of Josiah, King Josiah. He never saw it coming. It's a death you never see coming. The man was on the top of the world. He was winning a huge victory over his enemies. Everything was great that day, and out of nowhere, an arrow fell from the sky, struck him, and he died. This is a promise. You will not have to fear that death that comes from nowhere, that you don't see coming. People throughout the generations, the centuries, have feared a death that they don't see coming. You don't need to. Well, at least the Son of God doesn't. He doesn't actually need to fear a death he doesn't see coming, does he? Because Jesus never experienced a death he didn't see coming. In fact, the only death Jesus experienced, not only did he see it coming, he made it come. So the promise is still good for him. Actually, that's a wonderful thing. It's probably why Jesus can walk around with such confidence knowing that he's going to die on the cross. For those 3 years, remember another story of Jesus? He's at Nazareth, he's preaching in his synagogue, and they get mad at him because he wants to extend the good news and the gospel and the blessings of the Messiah to Gentiles. They didn't like that. So they drag him out of the synagogue, and they're going to throw him off a cliff. I can just hear Jesus thinking in his mind, Psalm 91. Nice try, guys. But I do not have to fear the arrow that flies by day. No death is going to come to me out of nowhere. My death has been foreordained by God, and I will choose every step that it takes to get there. And so he just turned around and he walked right through the crowd, and they couldn't do anything about it. Because of why? Because God made him a promise, right here, this promise. He says, no, you're not dying. You're not dying by some unexpected arrow flying and all of a sudden hitting you, or a crowd of maniac people who think that they can interfere with my plans and throw you off a cliff. That's not going to happen. Every promise in this chapter God has kept to his Son. Even when we look at the cross, even when he does suffer. You just have to read it a particular way. Nor the pestilence that stalks in the darkness, nor the destruction that wastes at noonday. These things are not going to take your life, Jesus. They won't. Thousands will die around you, but you're not going to die that way. Because you have made the Lord your dwelling place. There's that condition again. You have made the Lord your dwelling place, the Most High, who is my refuge. No evil shall be allowed to befall you, no plague come near your tent. Now, all of those things that are mentioned in those verses remind me of Romans chapter 8 and something that Paul said. But it's slightly different. The psalmist says to Jesus, none of these bad things will ever befall you. And then he lists a whole slew of things, and there's such broad terms that virtually cover every bad thing that could ever happen to you. Romans 8 does the same thing, right? At the end of Romans 8. But how does Paul say it? Not tribulation, not the sword. He goes and lists like 10 things, but he doesn't say none of these things will befall you. In fact, Paul implies all of these things will befall you. What does he say? They cannot separate you from the love of Christ. They can't separate you from the love of Christ. So we can experience all of these things that Jesus has been promised. They won't happen to you, but they can happen to us. But they cannot separate us from the love of Christ. Well, that's at least a part of promise that we got to hold on to, and I think there's more to it. And now we know it's talking about Jesus because Satan himself tells us that it was talking about Jesus. We all recognize the verse, right? Satan knows this verse by heart. He quoted it to Jesus. For he will command his angels concerning you to guard you in all your ways. On their hands they will bear you up, lest you strike your foot against a stone. Let's make this clear, Mike. You can fall off a ladder, so be careful. God has not promised to catch you if you fall. Now, if Jesus fell off a ladder, he would catch it. Because Jesus is not dying falling off a ladder. In fact, Jesus is dying climbing up a cross. But Satan quotes this verse to Jesus. And how does he do it? He's tempting him. In fact, we had a couple songs that talked about Satan's temptations, and I thought that's a good little connection with this passage. Because Satan quotes this verse to Jesus. Why don't you just jump off? He's at the pinnacle of the temple. He says, just jump off and prove you're the Son of God. Notice he didn't just say, prove you're a person who dwells with the Most High. Prove you're one of God's children. No, prove that you are the anointed Messiah. That's what Satan was tempting him with. Prove that you are the one that God has promised to come. How can I prove it? Jump off this thing, and he has promised to catch you. Well, was Satan right? Almost. This was a promise made to the anointed Son of God, the Messiah. But the promise doesn't extend to people testing God by jumping off. In fact, here's what Satan is so clever. The moment Jesus jumps off the top of the temple, what is he not doing? Abiding in the shadow of the Almighty. What he's not doing is dwelling in the presence of God. He's not listening to the Father. He's testing the Father. And I don't want to break the news to Satan. Jesus obviously knew it. If Jesus would have jumped off there, he'd have hit the ground. Because that promise is not made unconditionally. It's made to the person who is always, always walking in the will of the Father, trusting in the purposes and the plan of the Father. Somebody who thinks they can test that, they're going to hit hard. That's like jumping out of a plane without a chute. There are no angels waiting to catch you. I like this part for Jesus and for us. Verse 13, you will tread on the lion and the adder. The young lion and the serpent you will trample underfoot. It's nice in this psalm that God doesn't just say, I got some promises that you will survive. Here's my promise, you're going to survive a lot of bad things, Jesus. No, it's not just survive. You will conquer. You will have victory over my enemies. You will trample underfoot the serpent. Does Jesus do that? Is this promise kept? Does Jesus crush the serpent's head? Do we ever crush this? I didn't crush the serpent's head, especially when we know the serpent is a reference to Satan. But Jesus did. And why? By the way, when did Jesus crush the serpent's head? When he died on the cross. Okay, keep that in your mind. Now read the next line. Because he holds fast to me. God is speaking. The Father is speaking to the Son, to us about the Son. Because Jesus, my Son, holds fast to me in love. When did he do that? When he obeyed him and went to the cross. When he died for you and me, Jesus was showing that he was holding fast to the Father in love. And because of that, God's, I will deliver him. They say the resurrection is not in the Old Testament. That's exactly what that's talking about there. I will deliver him. Deliver him from what? From the thing that he does that shows that he holds fast to the Father in love. And what is that thing? He died. He died on a cross, and God says, because He held fast to me in love. I will. How do you deliver somebody from death? You raise him up on the third day. I will protect him because he knows my name. Jesus knows the Father's name. When he calls to me, I will answer him. Every time Jesus calls to the Father, he answers, which is why he says to you, ask in my name. Let me call out for you, because when I call, he answers. I will be with him in trouble. I will rescue him and honor him. Wait a minute. With long life, I will satisfy him and I will show him my salvation. He died at the age of 33. Really? Yeah, but he was raised 3 days later to live forever. I think that's long life. I believe Jesus got all these promises. So we can now put the psalm away and feel pretty good that it all is about Jesus. But doesn't it have anything to do with us? My favorite verse in the Bible, you have been here very long, probably don't remember, but I say it numerous times, so one of these days it's going to stick. Romans 8:32. He who did not spare his own son, but gave him up for us all, how will he not also, and the Greek here is, along with him, how will he not also, along with him, his son, graciously give us all things? Wait a minute, God. All things? Do you mean the promises of Psalm 91? Are you telling me that you are willing to give me the promises you made to your son? If I trust in him, that in some way I will be given all the things that you gave him. And along with him, I get them. I only get them with him. So obviously the last promise is resurrection life. Well, yeah, I'm willing to give you resurrection life along with my son Jesus, whom I've given resurrection life. You get resurrection life with him. You get the inheritance with him. You get all the blessings of God with him. They're all yours through faith. So consequently, is this a great psalm to read at the deathbed of a parent or a friend? You bet it is. Because you can sit and say to that person, if they trust in Jesus, no matter what Satan can throw at you, it cannot harm you. It's interesting, I think is it this guy who says it? Quotes Spurgeon on this? I think it is. Let me read you what he says here. It's an interesting take on Romans 8:28, which says, all things work together for good for those who love God. This is how Spurgeon explains Psalm 91. When therefore we stumble at 91:9-10 in protest, but harm does befall God's people. However, trustingly and obediently they take refuge in him. We do well to ponder Spurgeon's comment on these verses. I have quoted it elsewhere, but it is so full of insight that this exposition would be incomplete without it. This is what Spurgeon says. It is impossible that any ill should happen to the man who is beloved of the Lord. Ill to him is no ill, but only good in a mysterious form. Sickness is not an ill, it's only good in a mysterious form. Sudden death is not an ill, it's only good in a mysterious form. And this is why Spurgeon says this. Losses enrich him. When you lose money in the stock market, you will gain wealth in God's monetary system. Losses enrich him. Sickness is his medicine. Reproach is his honor. Death is his gain. I could add things here. Suffering is his perseverance. Transforms his character. You name me a bad thing, and Romans 8:28 can tell me, if you're a child of God, it's not ill when it comes to you, it's good. So nothing evil can come to you. No harm can happen to you. Because when Satan harms you, when this world harms you, God uses that harm for good. So it can't come to you. That's a great line. No evil in the strict sense happens to him, for everything is overruled for our good. And why is that? Because we put our faith in Jesus, and God made some promises to Jesus, and Jesus kept the conditions. And because Jesus kept the conditions and we have put our faith in him, we, along with him, receive these promises. Most importantly, resurrection life. So at my deathbed, I want somebody reading Psalm 91 to me. Because I want to be reminded that God has promised me resurrection through Jesus. There are blessings he's just pouring out. Remember last week? What did I ask you to think about? The cup that overflows. Often in my life, a cup overflows. This is how it happens. I get a cup and I take milk and I pour it about half full. And then I pull out of the refrigerator a bottle of A&W root beer. And I take that root beer and I pour it too fast into my milk. And before I know it, it's coming up so fast, it's going to overflow all over the counter. And what is my reaction? I grab that cup and I start sucking up that root beer and milk as fast as I can to keep it from making an incredible mess all over the place. I'm drinking as fast as I can to stop it from losing. When we read Psalm 23 and it says the cup that overflows, all we think about is, oh, it's so bountiful, God's blessings, it just keeps coming and running. Does anyone react to an overflowing cup that way? We react to an overflowing cup by, oh my goodness, I'm going to lose something. I want to drink it as fast as I possibly can so I don't lose any of it. That's your attitude towards blessings of God. God is pouring out his blessings into your life, and they're coming so fast, your cup is overflowing. You better start drinking quick. Because if you really appreciate what you're going to lose, I'm only losing root beer and milk. Come on, these are the blessings of God. Drink them down. They come fast and furious from the life of Jesus. Don't miss out. Don't lose any of them. God is pouring them out into your life, and drink them down, because all of them are for your good. All of them are a blessing in your life. Let's pray. Lord, we thank you for this passage and what it teaches us about your blessings and how they come to us. They come to us through your Son, because we are never able to keep the conditions. But your Son did for us. And our faith in him and makes it so that along with him, we receive all of the promises you made in the whole Bible. Every last promise in the Bible belongs to us, because those promises belong to your Son, Jesus. And he shares them with us. Lord, I pray that we will develop an attitude of, just give me more and more and more of your blessing. I want to know every blessing you have for me. I pray this in Jesus' name. Amen. Let's stand. We're going to sing, and then we're going to have a time of fellowship time in the fellowship hall to eat. But after we're done singing, you're going to give the ladies a few minutes to get back there and set things up. So just sit with some people around you for a few minutes before you run for the food, and let them set things up. All right? Let's stand and sing. Let's sing about that cup that overflows.